Pam Bondi had always been the kind of person people noticed when she walked into a room. She had confidence, charm, and that kind of energy that made others listen. For years, she had worked hard to build her reputation as a smart, capable woman who could handle anything. Whether it was speaking in front of large crowds or solving difficult problems, she always kept her composure. But one small moment was all it took to make her question everything she believed about herself. It was a sunny afternoon when Pam was invited to a local charity event. The event was meant to raise funds for families in need, and she had been asked to give a short speech. Pam had done speeches like this many times before, so she didn't think much of it. She picked out her outfit carefully, a light blue dress with a simple silver bracelet, and spent the morning going over her notes. She wanted her words to sound natural and kind, not rehearsed. When she arrived at the event, the atmosphere was cheerful. Children were playing. Volunteers were running around setting up tables, and music played softly in the background. People smiled and greeted her warmly as she made her way toward the stage. She loved moments like these, when everyone came together for a good cause. Pam felt calm and ready, the way she always did before a public appearance. As she stood behind the curtain waiting for her turn, one of the organizers whispered, "You're next." She nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the stage. The crowd applauded politely as she approached the microphone. For a second, she looked over the sea of faces, parents, reporters, students, and elderly couples. Everyone seemed friendly and relaxed. She smiled, feeling her nerves settle. But then, out of nowhere, the microphone made a loud screeching sound that echoed through the speakers. The noise was so sharp that people covered their ears. Pam flinched and instinctively stepped back. The sudden movement made her heel catch on the edge of the carpet that ran across the stage. Before she could steady herself, she stumbled forward, arms flailing, and nearly fell face first in front of everyone. There was a small gasp from the crowd, followed by an awkward silence. She quickly straightened up, forcing a smile even though her face was burning with embarrassment. "Well," she said with a shaky laugh, "that's one way to make an entrance." A few people laughed politely, but most just looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to laugh or not. Pam tried to continue with her speech, pretending nothing had happened, but she could feel her hands trembling as she gripped the sides of the podium. As she spoke, her voice wavered slightly. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears. The words she had practiced so many times now felt heavy and awkward. She could see a few people in the audience whispering, others glancing at their phones. Her mind raced, wondering if someone had recorded the moment she stumbled. She tried to focus on her message about kindness, support, and community, but her thoughts kept circling back to that awful screech and the stumble that followed. When her speech finally ended, she gave a small nod, smiled, and stepped away from the microphone. The applause that followed was polite but not enthusiastic. Pam felt like the longest 10 minutes of her life had just ended. She left the stage quickly and went straight to the restroom, closing the door behind her. She leaned against the counter and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was slightly pale, and she could still feel the rush of adrenaline from the embarrassment. She took a deep breath and told herself it was fine, that everyone makes mistakes. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation. She had always been proud of her composure, and now she felt like she had lost it in front of a whole crowd. Still, she smiled at the few people she passed on her way out of the venue, and thanked the organizers before quietly leaving. That evening, Pam sat on her couch, trying to relax with a cup of tea. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends who had seen her at the event. Some said kind things like, "You handled it so well," but she could tell from the tone that they were trying to make her feel better. Then came the message she had been dreading, a link to a short video. Someone had recorded the moment when the microphone screeched and she stumbled. The clip was already circulating on social media. At first, she told herself not to watch it, but curiosity got the better of her. She pressed play. The video started with the sound of the microphone screeching, followed by her stumble, and then her awkward attempt to laugh it off. The caption read, "When confidence takes a tumble." People had started commenting, some harmless jokes, others not so kind. A few users made fun of her expression. Others called her clumsy or fake. Pam stared at the screen, her stomach tightening. She had been in public life long enough to know that the internet could be cruel. But seeing herself become a joke felt different. It felt personal. She tried to remind herself that it was just a few seconds, just one moment out of her entire life. but the sting of humiliation was sharp. The next day, the video had spread even further. A local blog posted about it, turning the incident into a small headline. Charity speaker trips in front of crowd, still finishes speech. The article wasn't mean-spirited, but the comment section underneath was full of people laughing or making sarcastic remarks. Pam avoided reading too many of them, but a few stuck in her mind anyway. She went through her day as usual, but it felt like everyone was looking at her differently. At the grocery store, she imagined people recognizing her from the video. At work, she caught someone whispering after she walked past. Maybe it was all in her head, but it made her more self-conscious than ever before. That night, she sat on her bed scrolling through her phone, wondering how such a small, meaningless moment could suddenly become the thing everyone remembered her for. She had given dozens of powerful speeches in her life, helped raise thousands of dollars for charities, and worked hard to make a difference, but now, this one embarrassing moment seemed to overshadow it all. Pam's close friend called her that evening to check in. "You know, it's really not that bad," her friend said softly. "People forget these things fast." Pam wanted to believe that, but she couldn't shake the thought that people weren't laughing with her. They were laughing at her. After hanging up, she put her phone aside and sat quietly. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She closed her eyes and thought about all the times she had watched others go through similar public moments. Politicians misspeaking, celebrities tripping on red carpets, and how easy it was to laugh from the outside. Now she understood what it felt like on the inside. Pam wasn't angry at anyone, just disappointed in herself. She felt like she should have handled it better, made it funny, turned it into something light. Instead, she had looked nervous and stiff, and that made people notice even more. She thought about all the advice she had given others over the years. Don't take things personally. Stay confident. Everyone makes mistakes. Now those same words sounded hollow. As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she realized something important. She had spent so much of her life trying to look perfect, always composed, always in control, that the idea of being seen as anything less terrified her. Maybe this moment was a lesson she didn't know she needed. Maybe it was a reminder that being human means sometimes stumbling, literally and figuratively. But in that moment, it was too hard to see it as a lesson. It just felt like failure. Days passed, but the feeling lingered. Each morning she woke up hoping people had moved on, and each day she'd come across another post, another joke. Slowly the video started to fade from the headlines, but the memory of it stayed alive in her mind. One evening she decided to take a walk through the park. The sun was setting, and families were out enjoying the cool breeze. She sat on a bench and watched the world move around her. A little girl nearby tripped while running after a ball and fell. For a second, the girl looked like she might cry, but instead she laughed, got up, brushed herself off, and kept running. Pam couldn't help but smile. Maybe that was what she needed to do, get up and keep going. Maybe the embarrassment wasn't the end of something, but the start of something else. She didn't know yet what that was, but she could feel a small spark inside her beginning to return. The world had seen her stumble, but what mattered now was what she would do next. The morning light slipped through the curtains, but Pam didn't feel like getting out of bed. Her phone buzzed with notifications that she didn't want to check. It had been a week since the charity event, but it still felt like the whole world remembered her fall. Even though the online posts were slowing down, the sting of embarrassment hadn't faded. She finally sat up, rubbed her eyes, and looked around her quiet room. The soft ticking of the clock was the only sound. Usually mornings were her favorite part of the day. She liked waking up early, reading the news and starting her day with coffee. But now she found herself dreading the mornings because it meant facing another day where she had to pretend that everything was fine. When she walked into the kitchen, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from a colleague. "Hey, don't worry about the video," it said. "People have already moved on." Pam stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Thanks. I'm fine." She wasn't fine, but it was easier to say that than to explain how she really felt. Later that day, she went to the office. Everyone was polite, just like always, but there was a strange tension in the air. A few coworkers smiled a little too wide when they saw her. One man in the break room tried to joke, saying, "Careful with the carpet, Pam." He laughed like it was harmless fun, but it hit her harder than she expected. She forced a smile and walked away. The rest of the day passed slowly. She did her work quietly, avoiding small talk. It wasn't that anyone was being cruel, but she could feel how people were treating her differently. The woman who used to walk into meetings full of confidence now felt herself shrinking a little inside. That evening, she stopped by her parents' house for dinner. Her mother could tell something was wrong right away. "You look tired," she said softly as she set the table. Pam smiled faintly. "Just a long week," she replied. Her father, who was always practical, tried to cheer her up. "You know, the internet forgets fast," he said. "Next week, someone else will be the story." Pam nodded but stayed quiet. She didn't want to argue, but it wasn't about the internet anymore. It was about how the moment had made her feel, how quickly her confidence could vanish in front of others. After dinner, she helped her mother wash the dishes. The warm water and soft clinking of plates gave her a small sense of calm. Her mother finally spoke again. "You've always cared too much about what people think," she said gently. "That's both your strength and your weakness." Pam didn't answer. She knew her mother was right. For most of her life, she had worked hard to be admired, to appear strong and capable, but that kind of strength came with a price because when something went wrong, even something small, it felt like the world was collapsing. That night, when she got home, she sat by the window looking out at the city lights. The quiet hum of cars in the distance made her feel oddly alone. She opened her laptop and watched the video again. She told herself she was doing it to face her fear, to study what had happened. But the truth was, part of her still couldn't believe it had happened at all. She watched herself walk on stage, the moment the microphone screeched, the stumble, and the awkward smile that followed. It lasted only a few seconds, yet those few seconds had become a shadow over her days. She noticed how she froze for a moment after tripping, her shoulders tensed, her smile unsure. She realized she hadn't laughed naturally. She had forced it, hoping it would make things less awkward. But it hadn't worked. Pam paused the video and stared at the frozen image of herself. "That's not me," she whispered under her breath. She looked small, fragile, and uncertain, completely different from the woman she thought she was. The next few days were quiet. She went to work, came home, and kept mostly to herself. Her friends invited her out for lunch, but she kept making excuses. She said she was busy, but in truth, she just didn't feel like being around people. The thought of facing another round of pity or jokes made her stomach twist. One evening, her phone rang again. It was an old friend she hadn't talked to in a while. "Hey," the voice on the other end said. "I saw what happened online. Are you okay?" Pam tried to sound cheerful. "I'm fine. It's no big deal." But her friend wasn't convinced. "You've had tougher days than this. Don't let a silly video make you doubt yourself." Pam smiled a little, even though her eyes felt heavy. "I know. I just didn't expect it to bother me this much." "It's because you care," her friend replied. "That's not a bad thing. But don't let embarrassment stop you from showing up again. People forget, but you'll remember how you handled it." That night, Pam thought about those words for a long time. How she handled it. She had walked off that stage trying to pretend nothing had happened, but deep down, she had run away. She had let her fear of being judged take control. Maybe that's why it hurt so much, because she felt she had disappointed herself. A few days later, she went for a walk downtown. The air was cool and the city was busy as always. She passed a group of people talking loudly on a cafe terrace. For a second, she thought she heard her name and her heart skipped. But when she looked closer, they were just laughing about something else. She sighed, realizing how paranoid she had become. The world wasn't thinking about her as much as she imagined. She stopped by a small bookstore she liked to visit. Inside, it smelled of old paper and quiet comfort. She browsed the shelves until a book title caught her attention. It was about overcoming fear and self-doubt. She picked it up and read the first few pages. One line stood out to her. "Confidence isn't built in moments of success. It's built in moments of recovery." She closed the book slowly, thinking about those words. Maybe this moment wasn't about failure at all. Maybe it was about learning how to stand back up after falling. That night, she sat at her desk and opened her notebook. She hadn't written in a long time, but she began jotting down her thoughts. She wrote about how embarrassment can feel heavier than it should, how it can make you hide from the world even when you don't need to. She wrote about her fear of being laughed at, about how strange it was that something so small could shake her so deeply. As she wrote, something started to shift inside her. For the first time, she wasn't just reliving the moment. She was learning from it. She realized that everyone has an image of themselves that they try to protect, and when that image cracks, it hurts. But maybe there was something freeing about it too. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect all the time. The next day, she made herself a promise. She wouldn't run from it anymore. The embarrassment had happened. People had laughed. But it was over. What mattered now was what she did next. She began to slowly open up again. When her friends invited her out for coffee that weekend, she finally said yes. At first, she worried they'd bring up the video, but they didn't. They just talked and laughed like old times. It felt good to be out again, to feel normal. A few days later, one of her friends mentioned another public event coming up, a community conference where she could volunteer. For a second, she hesitated. The idea of standing in front of people again made her nervous. But then she thought about the little girl she had seen in the park who had fallen, laughed, and kept running. Maybe, she said slowly. I'll do it. Her friend smiled. That's the spirit. That night, Pam stood in front of her mirror, rehearsing a few lines out loud just to see how it felt. Her voice was shaky at first, but then it grew stronger. She caught her own reflection and smiled softly. The woman in the mirror looked the same, but something in her eyes had changed. There was still a hint of pain, but also a flicker of strength. She realized that real confidence wasn't about never stumbling. It was about not letting one stumble stop her. She still felt nervous, still doubted herself at times, but she also knew she was stronger than that one moment on stage. The embarrassment that once felt unbearable was slowly turning into something else. A reminder that she was human, that she could recover, that she could keep going. And for the first time in weeks, she went to bed not thinking about the fall, but about the rise that could come after. Pam sat at her kitchen table one evening, staring at a blank page in her notebook. For the past few weeks, she had spent hours thinking about the charity event, replaying every detail of the stumble, the screeching microphone, the awkward pause. She had felt small, humiliated, and exposed. But tonight, something was different. She didn't want to hide anymore. She didn't want to pretend that she hadn't been affected. She wanted to take control of her story. The idea came to her slowly, almost hesitantly. What if she faced it head on? What if, instead of pretending the fall hadn't happened, she talked about it openly? She knew it was risky. People could laugh again. People could still criticize. But she also knew that pretending she was fine, while inside she felt shaken, had done nothing to make her feel stronger. The next morning, she called a friend who had always supported her. I want to do something different at the next public event, she said, her voice steady but cautious. I want to talk about what happened. Honestly, her friend was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? She asked. Some people might, I don't know, judge you. Pam smiled a little wryly. Maybe, but at least I'll be telling the truth. And if people judge me, well, that's on them, not me. By the end of the week, she had prepared a small speech for a local workshop she had been invited to. It wasn't about the stumble itself, but about confidence, resilience, and how moments of embarrassment could teach you more than moments of success ever could. She practiced in front of the mirror, rehearsing lines, watching her gestures, and trying to imagine herself standing tall in front of the audience. When the day of the workshop arrived, she felt the familiar nerves settle in her stomach. Her palms were slightly sweaty and her heart raced when she stepped into the room. There were around 100 people seated waiting for her. Some faces were familiar. Most were strangers. The bright lights made the room feel smaller, more intense. But she took a deep breath, reminding herself why she was there. She walked to the front, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the audience. For a second, a tiny spark of fear returned. She remembered the screech, the stumble, the laughter, the comments online. But instead of letting that fear control her, she let it fuel her. She smiled softly and began. Thank you for having me, she said. I want to start today by being honest. Not long ago, I had one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. In front of a crowd. She paused, letting the words settle. A few people shifted in their seats, curious. I tripped on stage. The microphone squealed, and yes, I looked a little ridiculous. A quiet laugh ran through the room. Pam smiled, noticing that people weren't laughing at her. They were listening, understanding. She continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. At first, I felt small. I felt humiliated. I wondered if all my confidence, everything I had worked for, had vanished in that one moment. She spoke slowly, deliberately, feeling the weight of each sentence. But then I realized something. That moment didn't define me. It showed me something important, something I want to share with all of you today. Confidence isn't about never stumbling. It's about how you respond when you do. As she spoke, she could feel the energy in the room shift. People were leaning forward, nodding, listening closely. Some smiled softly, some wrote notes. She told them about how she had avoided social events for weeks, how she had felt small and judged, and how she had slowly started to understand that embarrassment wasn't weakness, it was human. Being embarrassed is not failure, she said firmly. It's a lesson. It's a chance to see yourself clearly, to learn about yourself and to grow stronger. And yes, it hurts. But the hurt doesn't last forever. What lasts is what you do next. Pam paused, looking out at the audience. She noticed a woman in the front row, nodding slowly, a tear in her eye. Another person whispered to their friend, smiling. Pam realized that by sharing her truth, she was connecting with people in a way she hadn't expected. The stumble, the embarrassment, the fear, all of it had led her here to a place where her story could inspire others. She went on to share a small exercise she had done herself. She asked the audience to think of a moment when they felt embarrassed or humiliated. She told them to close their eyes, remember the feelings, and then imagine themselves standing tall, strong, and unafraid. Many people followed along, breathing slowly, their faces softening. Afterward, she told them about the steps she had taken to rebuild her confidence. She spoke about journaling, about talking to supportive friends, about choosing to face public appearances instead of hiding from them. She emphasized that real strength didn't come from perfection. It came from resilience. By the time she finished, the room was quiet for a moment, and then the applause began. It wasn't a polite clap. It was warm, genuine, and full of respect. People came up to her afterward, some with stories of their own embarrassing moments, some simply saying thank you for being honest and relatable. Pam smiled, feeling a sense of relief she hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since that day at the charity event, she felt in control. She realized that what had once made her feel small could now make her strong. Sharing her story had taken courage, but it had also reminded her of her own power. The power to shape her narrative, to turn humiliation into strength, and to inspire others along the way. In the following days, she noticed something remarkable. People she had never spoken to began approaching her with genuine warmth. They shared their own stories of embarrassment, failure, and recovery. Some were small, everyday moments. Others were life-changing experiences. In every conversation, Pam felt a sense of connection she hadn't felt before. She also noticed that her own fear of judgment began to fade. When she walked into a room now, she carried herself with quiet confidence. Not the kind of confidence that comes from perfection, but the kind that comes from knowing that even if you stumble, you can rise again. She found herself smiling more freely, laughing at small mistakes, and even joking lightly about her past stumble when the moment felt right. One afternoon, she received an invitation to speak at another event, larger this time, a community leadership seminar. She hesitated briefly, remembering the fear she had felt before, but she knew she couldn't say no. She had learned that running away only gave fear more power. She accepted the invitation, determined to bring her message to more people. The days leading up to the seminar were filled with preparation. She practiced her speech, refined her message, and even recorded herself to watch how she moved and spoke. Each time she watched, she noticed something important. The nervousness hadn't disappeared completely, but it had changed. It was no longer a paralyzing fear. It was a signal, a reminder that she cared about what she was doing and that it mattered to her. On the day of the seminar, she arrived early, walking through the empty hall, imagining the audience filling the seats. She felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, but embraced it this time. It was energy, not terror. She remembered the little girl in the park who had fallen and laughed, and she remembered the line from the book she had read weeks ago. Confidence is built in moments of recovery. When she stepped onto the stage, the room was filled with hundreds of people. The lights were bright, and the audience was buzzing with anticipation. She took a deep breath, smiled, and began. She opened with honesty, just like before, sharing the story of her stumble at the charity event. But this time, she didn't just speak about embarrassment. She spoke about strength, resilience, and how every person has the power to turn a moment of shame into a moment of empowerment. The audience listened intently, captivated by her authenticity. She shared stories she had collected from friends, family, and strangers, stories of people facing fear, failure, and embarrassment, and how they had overcome it. She encouraged everyone to see mistakes not as weaknesses, but as opportunities to grow. By the end of her speech, the applause was deafening. People were on their feet, clapping, smiling, some wiping tears from their eyes. Pam felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with courage. She realized that the stumble that had once made her feel small had now given her a platform to inspire hundreds. That night, as she walked home under the city lights, she reflected on everything that had happened. She had faced her fear, shared her truth, and discovered that vulnerability was not weakness, it was power. She thought about the messages she had received from people she didn't even know, telling her that her words had made them feel less alone. She smiled softly. Pam knew that the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more moments of fear and embarrassment, but she also knew that she had learned something invaluable. Her power didn't come from being perfect. It came from being human, being honest, and choosing to rise after every fall. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly free. After the seminar, Pam felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in weeks. She had faced a crowd larger than the charity event, shared her story honestly, and connected with hundreds of people. The warmth and applause from the audience stayed with her long after she had left the stage. For the first time, she began to realize that the stumble, which had once seemed like the end of the world, had actually opened a door she never expected. In the following days, she started receiving messages from people all over, students, professionals, parents, thanking her for her honesty. Many shared stories of their own embarrassing moments, from tripping in front of coworkers to making mistakes during public speeches, and how reading or hearing about someone else overcoming similar challenges gave them hope. Pam read every message carefully. Each one felt like a small reminder that her experience had meaning beyond her own life. Her friends noticed a change in her. She walked taller, smiled more easily, and even laughed at her own past missteps. They told her she looked lighter somehow, more genuine. Pam realized they were right. She hadn't changed in her abilities or intelligence, but she had changed in her willingness to accept herself as she truly was, mistakes and all. A few weeks later, she was invited to speak at a local community center focused on youth mentorship. This time she didn't just tell her story. She created a small workshop. She asked participants to share moments when they had felt embarrassed or inadequate, and then guided them through exercises that helped turn those feelings into motivation. The room was full of energy and sincerity. Young adults and teenagers listened carefully as Pam explained that everyone has moments of vulnerability, but those moments don't define them. They reveal opportunities to grow. During the session, a young woman raised her hand. Her voice was soft, but her words were clear. "I once gave a presentation at school, and I completely forgot what I was going to say. Everyone laughed, and I felt like I'd ruined everything. But after hearing you, I think I can try again without being so afraid." Pam smiled. "Exactly," she said. "That fear you feel doesn't have to stop you. It's just a signal that you care, that you want to do better. But caring doesn't mean being perfect. It means showing up, even when you're afraid." Moments like this began to shape her days. The small victories, the real connections with people, reminded her that her fall had been a turning point, not a failure. She began scheduling more talks, workshops, and interviews. The media that once focused on her stumble now highlighted her message of resilience. Articles praised her for transforming an embarrassing moment into a lesson for others. Her story became a source of inspiration, especially for those who struggled with public speaking, confidence, or self-doubt. Pam also began working on her own personal growth behind the scenes. She joined a local speaking club not out of necessity, but because she wanted to refine her skills and share her experiences more effectively. She practiced storytelling techniques, learned to control her nerves, and explored ways to make her presentations more interactive. Each session reminded her that growth was ongoing and that no one was ever truly finished learning. One afternoon, she received a call from a national nonprofit organization that wanted her to participate in a leadership panel. This was a larger platform than anything she had experienced since the charity event. For a moment, old fears tried to creep back in. She thought about the stumble, the microphone, the way she had frozen in front of the crowd. But instead of letting those memories intimidate her, she smiled. She knew now that her story was her strength. She agreed to participate. The panel was held in a grand auditorium. Pam arrived early, walking through the hallways and seeing the stage set up with chairs for the speakers and a wide audience seating area. The nerves returned briefly, as they always did, but they were softer this time. She reminded herself of the months she had spent preparing, her practice, her workshops, her moments of reflection, and she knew she was ready. When it was her turn to speak, she walked onto the stage with confidence. She greeted the audience warmly and began by telling her story of the stumble, the screeching microphone, and the moment of humiliation. But she didn't stop there. She spoke about what she had learned, the power of resilience, the importance of facing fear, and the strength in vulnerability. The audience responded immediately. Heads nodded, smiles appeared, and at times there was laughter. Not mocking laughter, but laughter that acknowledged a shared human experience. She noticed a man in the front row jotting notes, a teenager raising her hand with a curious expression, and several people leaning forward, fully engaged. Pam felt a sense of connection she had never felt before. After the panel, she stayed behind to speak with attendees. People shared their own struggles, from nervous public speakers to people trying to overcome shyness. Pam listened carefully, offering encouragement and advice. She realized that her personal embarrassment had turned into a bridge for others to share their experiences. Her story had become a tool for empathy, teaching her as much as it taught them. Back at home that evening, she reflected on the journey. A few months ago, she had felt small, insecure, and ashamed. Now she felt powerful, not because she had never stumbled again, but because she had learned how to rise. She thought about all the people she had met, the workshops, the panels, and the messages she had received. It amazed her how one moment of discomfort could ripple out and create a wave of understanding and encouragement. Pam also noticed a change in how she approached daily life. She no longer avoided small embarrassments or awkward moments. If she spilled coffee at a meeting or mispronounced a word during a casual talk, she laughed at herself and moved on. The weight of perfection had lifted, and with it came freedom. Her interactions felt more genuine, her relationships warmer, and her self-respect stronger. One evening, while preparing for another speaking engagement, she received a heartfelt email from a woman she hadn't met. The woman wrote about how she had avoided public speaking for years because of fear of humiliation. After reading Pam's story online, she felt inspired to take a small step, giving a talk at her local library. She wrote that her first attempt hadn't been perfect, but it had been enough, and she thanked Pam for showing that imperfection was part of the journey. Pam read the email twice. Her heart warmed. She realized that her power wasn't in avoiding mistakes or embarrassment. It was in being real, honest, and brave enough to share those experiences with others. That email reminded her why she had decided to face her fear in the first place. The next few months were busy but fulfilling. Pam traveled to different cities for speaking engagements, workshops, and mentorship programs. Everywhere she went, she encouraged people to embrace their vulnerability, to see mistakes as lessons, and to build strength through resilience. Her own journey became a living example of her message. People could see the change in her, the calm in her posture, the warmth in her smile, the honesty in her words. Even in moments when she felt nervous, she remembered the stumble that had started it all. She remembered the feeling of embarrassment, the sharp pang of shame, and the silence that had followed. But instead of shrinking away, she used that memory as a reminder of how far she had come. Each time she remembered it, she felt a little stronger, a little braver, and a little more capable of inspiring others. Her friends noticed a remarkable transformation. They told her that she radiated confidence without arrogance, that her presence made people feel comfortable and understood. Pam realized that true power wasn't about control or dominance, it was about connection, empathy, and courage. By showing her own imperfections and the way she overcame them, she gave others permission to do the same. Pam also started mentoring young women and men who struggled with self-confidence and fear of judgment. She shared her story, listened to their experiences, and helped them find ways to turn fear into motivation. She emphasized that everyone had moments of embarrassment, but those moments could become opportunities for growth if they were met with honesty and courage. One day, she received an invitation to participate in a televised interview about resilience and personal growth. The thought of cameras and a large audience would have terrified her a few months earlier. But now she felt ready. She prepared her story carefully, focusing not on her stumble itself, but on the lessons she had learned, the people she had helped, and the importance of embracing human vulnerability. When the interview aired, the response was overwhelming. People wrote messages of support, shared their own stories, and praised her for turning a moment of embarrassment into a message of hope. Pam realized that what once felt like a public humiliation had become a source of inspiration for thousands of people she would never meet. That night, as she sat quietly in her living room, she reflected on the journey: a stumble on a stage, a screeching microphone, a few moments of embarrassment. These had seemed like the end of the world at the time. But they had led her to something greater, a deeper understanding of herself, a stronger connection with others, and a message that could touch lives. Pam smiled to herself. She knew that challenges would come again,